Over on TikTok, young people are complaining about their MAGA parents. One person talking about how their parents actually kicked them out for supporting Black Lives Matter. Wow. I couldn't believe it when I saw this story. I said, what kind of parent kicks their kids out? I mean, you can't have kids out on the street. These poor kids don't know how to live or work. What are you doing? They must be, 14 years. Oh, wait. They're 23. The person who got kicked out is 23 years old. You didn't so much get kicked out of your parents' house as it's more so them saying, dude, it's time to grow up and get your own place. I know a lot of young people probably do live with their parents, especially now because of how crazy everything's been. So I'm only half kidding. But, look, at a certain age, you do got to figure things out for yourself. Maybe get a place with your friends. But what the story says to me, a lot of these parents, I'm just going to say it, man. You raised your kids wrong. You raised your kids wrong. I know. Who am I to say I don't have any kids? My parents raised me right. And not everybody knows the answers. I remember having a conversation with a buddy of mine, and I said, look, man, when I have my kid, he is going to be a ninja skateboarder scientist. He's going to be the smartest, the fastest, the best. And my friend laughed and said, your kid's going to be a little S-head, and you know it. You can't control what these kids do. Everybody thinks they know what to do. I disagree. I think there is a way to be a good parent. I'm not going to pretend like I know how because I don't have any kids. But I think there's a way to do it. And unfortunately, while I'm not trying to be overly disrespectful, I think these parents made mistakes. Too many people trusted the education system. Too many people trusted these schools. I hate these schools. I think they're terrible. I can't stand the manipulation and the indoctrination. And now we're seeing what these schools are doing to kids. This is just the beginning. From BuzzFeed, they say, the latest TikTok trend in venting about your MAGA parents. Children of conservatives are drifting far from their parents, and they're doing so in front of the entire world. And it's kind of cringy, to be honest. TikTok is where Bridget Olek told the world she had to leave her father's Minnesota lake house after he discovered she'd protested at a Black Lives Matter rally in Fargo, North Dakota. I wonder, protested or rioted? Tensions between the two had been brewing for a while. He's a Republican and a Trump supporter. She's the polar opposite. Oleg said the final break came when she went to a protest instead of entertaining family members who were visiting for the weekend. Her father asked her to leave, so she packed up her van and headed to other parts of Minnesota, then North Dakota, then Arizona, and finally North Carolina for now. Quote, you know those feisty white girls y'all be talking about? She said while driving in a TikTok video over audio of Cash Doll's Ice Me Out. The ones with racist parents that are supporting Black Lives Matter, yeah? A bee just got kicked out of her house for supporting Black Lives Matter. I mean, it's time. And she added, I'm 23. Now, I am kind of sad by this. Are these kids so headstrong and indoctrinated you can't sit down with them and have a conversation? I think if that's the case, then maybe they needed more trust in you. And maybe that's what the school system is doing. I mean, look, you're a kid. I remember being super young, and they take you away from your parents for 8+ hours per day. I mean, your parents are there in the morning. They pick you up at school or you walk home. I walked to school and walked back for the most part. My school was literally 1 block away from me. So, it wasn't that big of a deal. But you go to school and you're around all these other people and your parents don't really know who these people are. And we saw in this viral thread, a teacher saying, oh no, now that these classes are being live streamed, the parents are going to learn what we're telling their children. You end up with kids like this. Maybe we need to make sure the next generation, all of us, the people who are hopefully going to have kids, make sure those kids stay close to you and trust you and do what you can to be a good leader, to teach them, to help them grow so they understand and they trust you back. Then when they're 23 and they want to go to a Black Lives Matter, protest or whatever, you can sit down with them and say, absolutely. And I will absolutely support you in this. But first, why don't we have a conversation? Let me show you some things and ask you how you feel about them. And then you could have a real conversation. I think there's fair points to be made for Black Lives Matter, 100%. But the organization behind it is doing things that I completely disagree with. And there's cringe, freaky indoctrination. What I mean to say is, I have friends who don't like police brutality, and I completely understand and agree with them. That's the surface level of what's really going on. If you can talk to them and say, listen, here's what happens when you go out and defend these groups. There's the people who are engaging in violence, people who are dying. And I think you'd be wise to rethink joining these groups. But if it were me, if I was the parent, I'd probably never kick out my kid because I want them to be around me to at least hear what I have to say. So it's unfortunate something like this would happen. Let's read a little bit more. They say, and then the appeal to be to what seemed like no one at the time, but I'm going to be homeless for a while, so if anyone wants to let me couch surf, it's the kind of support teens and young adults like Oleg have come to expect in an era of crowdsourcing and mutual aid groups. It was a big ask to Oleg's 500 followers at the time. She now has 22,000. Imagine that. If the dad just said, okay, look, I love you, you're my daughter, I do not agree with you, but please don't leave. Stay here and just hang out with us and talk to us and be calm and be a parent to these kids. Now, here's what happens. It's not even so much about kids, it's about anyone in general. This is why I always say, if somebody does wrong, and they come out and do the right thing, you give them credit and praise for it, and you are better off with them close to you than pushing them away. I'll tell you what's going to happen. This person, you know who's going to invite her in? It's going to be some radical in a squat. They're going to be like, yo, we have this squat downtown. Why don't you come hang out? And then she's going to be surrounded by even more radical individuals and go further down that rabbit hole. At least when she was in your house, you had some way to say, here are, the things I expect, but I respect you too, and I understand your point of view. I remember having, serious conversations with my parents about politics, and they certainly didn't agree with me all the time. I was a young, rambunctious, pretty, far leftist, and they never kicked me out or insulted me, and they did a good job. Look where I am today. So I respect that. It bums me out, man, to see these stories. They say the post was viewed more than 700,000 times, and more than 5,000 people commented on the viral video. Most responses were encouraging. Some people offered her a place to stay. Others asked for her Cash App or Venmo credentials. She raised $503, what she called pity money, and in turn donated $600 to BlackLivesMatter.com, evidenced by the receipt she used as a green screen backdrop. Maybe it's fake. Maybe it's a grifter. Maybe she never really got kicked out. But whether or not the story is true is less relevant. If you're a parent to one of these kids, don't kick them out. Don't yell at them. Be nice and ask them to at least talk to you about it. Maybe they're indoctrinated and too angry and they won't. That could be true in her case. But I tell you what, man, give it a shot. Say, why don't we go to a restaurant and just hang out every day? And then you can tell me why I'm wrong. That's what I'd say. I'd say, okay, you think I'm wrong 100%. How about you just talk to me and tell me everything you think I'm doing wrong? That's it. And I'll listen. And you give them that opportunity. And then you ask questions, the Socratic method. Say, okay, so if you think that voting for Trump is racist, how would you X? How do you feel about Y? What should we do? And try and have a conversation. Because in the end, for me, I don't think I'm not ever trying to convince anyone to do anything. I get these messages where they're like, Tim, thanks to you, I used to be, far right. Now I'm more centrist. I get people who are far left who are like, I used to be far left. Now I'm kind of center right. And I'm like, no. I'm not trying to make anybody do anything. I'm just trying to make everybody be kind of chill, hang out with each other, have a conversation, and actually navigate the problems we're facing. It's not so simple as to say all Republicans are wrong, all Democrats are wrong. I think the Democratic leadership right now is insane. I think most Democratic voters aren't paying attention, and I think people like her don't know what she's really talking about. We see these weird school curriculums, indoctrination. They're trying to manipulate people. So for me, it's if we can all hang out together, we'll find that middle ground and pull people away from the extreme ends. Real conversations will do that. But if all we have is anger, finger pointing, or kicking people out, eventually what happens is you push people into the dark corners. This is a perfect example of that. They say, quote, that TikTok I did not expect to blow up the way it did. Oleg, who goes by the name of, Pinky Rings, I'm not going to read that, on TikTok, told BuzzFeed News, I was basically just shouting into my phone saying, well, I got kicked out. I was truly taken aback by the response and then comments of everyone saying I could stay with them. To be fair, maybe the dad really just kicked her out because he was like, look, we don't get along. I get it. You weren't here for the family. You're 23. It's about time you got your own place. I'm sorry. I can respect that too. But if it were me and my kid was being indoctrinated into far left, whatever, I'd say, you're 23. You need to get your own place. But I'm worried about how you're being indoctrinated. So I want you to stay here. I think you should pay rent. That's what I'd say. I'd say, look, you're 23. You can at least pay rent a little bit. I understand kids don't want to live with their parents. I can respect that. And so I wouldn't make it an exorbitant rent. I would want to encourage them to get their own place. But it's tough. How much do you just let them do nothing? look, I'm going to say this, and I know a lot of people might be young and living with their parents because they can't do better, but I moved out when I was 18. I was gone. I tried leaving before I was 18. I said I would rather be a dude wandering through the forest with a pointy stick building a mud hut than dependent on other people. And that's probably because of how my parents raised me to be self-sufficient, to be responsible. Even though I recognize, social programs and the benefits they bring about, I'd rather be out on my own. So maybe if you're 23, it's time to move out and start building a life. But I got to add, this is no surprise to me that someone who's 23 is living with their parents and a leftist who got kicked out because of it. I wouldn't be surprised if the real story is just the father saying, I love you. I disagree with you. I think it's time you moved out because you're 23. And then this person said, well, I got kicked out, That sounds more likely to me. But at any rate, the main reason I want to talk about this, I know I said in the earlier segment I was going to talk about Cuomo, and then I saw this story and I was like, no, I got to talk about it. I got a lot to say. And I'll probably talk about it tonight on the podcast. I just think, we've got to be closer with each other. We've got to be open to communication. And that's kind of what I've done my whole life. And that's why I've become kind of a milquetoast moderate, because I hear you, man. I hear people that have good points, but these are opinions for the most part. Anyway, if you've got loved ones and you see them drifting in any direction, just be there for them. And that proximity can help, pull people back to the center. I'll leave it there. Next segment will be tomorrow at 10 a.m. However, at 8 p.m., I will be live hanging out, talking about liberals leaving the left for a little undemocratic national convention fun. They're going to be doing their DNC. I'll be doing a live show talking about people leaving the left. So that'll be over at youtube.com/TimCastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.